Well, hey, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on your time zone. I wanted to, Cassie and I were discussing some of these different things we can go through. We always get through and talk through different topics we can cover on these webcasts that we do. And over again, these Vault tips and tricks, just these little things sometimes make a big difference. And it seems like this is one that's often viewed, and a lot of questions come up with it. So I'm so glad you guys are joining today. And these are just some things that stood out to me as I'm using Vault, and I work with a lot of different customers, and a lot of times I'll go in and we'll be talking, and I'll just mention something offhand. I'm like, well, you could create a shortcut for that. I'm like, oh, it's a shortcut. And then we've got a whole conversation going on, and I realize, while this isn't new necessarily, a lot of these have been around for a long time, it's a lot of times missed. And so I just want to kind of point some of these out and bring them up and cover them. Some I've covered in other webcasts different times, but just all good information that bears repeating, I guess. So just a little bit about us with RAND Worldwide. If you've probably attended one of these before if you're attending now, but we are part of a larger corporation, RAND Worldwide. Imagine it is one of the divisions of that, and we're the leading provider for Autodesk solutions, Leica Geosystems. We do a lot of professional services, which is what I focus on, whether it's consulting, implementation of software, training, different things like that. We also have some sister companies. RAND 3D is a provider for Dassault software and Dassault and PTC training, and Ascent. And if you've ever taken an AutoCAD class, whether it's with us, or I should say Autodesk class, with us or with one of our competitors, really in the last 20 years, you've probably taken it with Ascent courseware. So we've got a division that writes that, and I consider myself very fortunate to be part of the same company as Ascent. We get to put a lot of information into the manuals, and we can discuss a lot of those different things. It's been really, really great to be a part of that. So I mentioned, RAND. Imagine it, and you can see we've got a map of these different locations. And even as I was going through as Cassie, I was looking at this, and I thought, you know what? This almost doesn't matter right now. We're doing so much remote work. We're dealing with all of these different things that we didn't deal with, 3 or 4 months ago. It did really matter. We're like, well, we've got a local resource. Now we're all local. We're the way that we can leverage the internet to access things, the way we can do remote access, whether it's through a VPN or through a WebEx like this, whatever it is. We've definitely got a lot of locations, and we cover a lot of space geographically, but we also can do this virtually now, and it's so common to be doing that I thought, man, I should just cover everything. We can get anywhere. So this is just a little bit about me. I'm one of the solutions team managers with ImagineIt. I really focus on the data management software and CAD software and manufacturing. So the Course Inventor, AutoCAD, AutoCAD Electrical, and the data management tools that go with it. And I've got 19 years with ImagineIt, and I was actually just looking at it. I think May 6th I get to update that to 20. So it's getting really, really close now. I almost did it for this one. And then the pic on the right, I'm sure a lot of you can kind of understand what that is right there. That is, I've got, that's what our kitchen table looked like a couple days ago. I've got a first grader who is doing all of her work remotely. I've got 2 teenagers, 1 freshman, 1 junior, who are doing it as well. My wife is teaching 2nd grade from our kitchen table. I today am not at the kitchen table. I've found a space where I can do a webcast like this without hearing the dog bark or hearing cartoon or video game noises. So I am safely away, and wherever you guys are joining me from, whether it's a kitchen table or the basement or hiding back in the bedroom, wherever it is, I'm glad that you're able to do that. So I do want to get into just some of these different topics that I have, and we'll have some times for questions at the end. I know this generates a lot of different discussion points as we go through. And I just was kind of looking for, like I said, those things that stand out to me that allow us to discuss. When I talk to clients, I'll throw something out there, and it turns out to be this talking point, this thing, oh man, I wish I'd known that years ago. So hopefully we can fill that in now. And a big thing that I want to talk about is we know we can search with Vault. And usually when I talk Vault with people, one of the key things that we start talking about right away is how to search. And you can search, and part of the reason we can do that is because Vault has the two components. It's a file store, which is all of the files that are in the Vault, and then we've got this SQL database, right? So the SQL database is part of what makes that searching so powerful. When we're searching, we are searching through with that SQL database for this information. So that's why we can do the searches that return really quickly. I can look for a file name, I can look for a file property, and find that. And by the way, I forgot to mention this at the start, so I'll mention it now. You notice I've got a check mark there, and it says Vault Basic. One thing that comes up when I do these particular webcasts a lot is I'll get that question, oh, is that available in Vault Basic? Is that available in Vault Basic? So out of, I think, my 5 or 6 tips that I've got going on here, the majority of them, I think out of 5, 4 of them are Vault Basic related. So it applies to all versions of Vault, but it also applies to Vault Basic. I've done several where I said, oh, no, I'm sorry, that's only in Professional. But this type of searching, definitely available within Vault Basic. So what am I talking about when I say search with a token? It's one of those things that you might find in a help file, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. You know, what are we really looking at? And this is the idea. A token is a piece of information. Could be alpha, could be numeric, but it's separated by something. So in this case, I've got this file name, A055401, A dash, and that dash is very important, 055401 dash 321. Then I've got, of course, the file extension, so .ipt. Every time there is a delimiter, a dash, a space, a period, that delimiter breaks the file name up into tokens, or really any property. I'm talking file names right now, but because they're so easy to understand, but really it comes down to that. So that delimiter breaks it up. So you see in the first one, I can search on A, I can search on 055401, I can search on 321. They're all going to return that file name because I can look by those individual tokens. There's another example there, and these are just taken off of Autodesk's website, but greatwhiteshark.doc is broken up. Great, then we have a space. So I can search for that. White, space, shark, and then we have a .doc. The other one that's interesting is this great work down here, which is GR. That's one token because when it goes to when it goes to alpha, it goes to numeric instead of alpha, it automatically separates it out. So we can search it's a separate token. So this, and then work, of course, is a token, and then XLS is a token. So those are all individual types of things that I can search on. And this becomes important a lot of times if I were searching for that, you know, 0-A-055-401, I would do A-055-401-321 and search for all that. Well, A is tons of things. Really, the thing I'm really interested in is that 055-401. I can only type that and find that same information. I can just type 321 without any wildcards, without anything else, and we're able to find that so quickly. So I'll just point out, I'm just going to jump here. I always like to do some live things, share a little. That's my inventor. There's my Vault. I will complain to anyone who will listen that they recently have made my Vault and my inventor icons the same color. So it's just much more difficult for me to figure out which is which as I'm looking through and find that. But if I take a look, just looking at some of these different files, for instance, I've got this RCCF, right, and I've got CF101. And CF101 in this whole Vault, I don't have to do CF101 star. I can just do CF101 to get all of that fed back to me because that delimiter becomes the break. Same thing, I can do DC, and that is in the middle of all these, but there's a break. That delimiter is the break of where that comes in. So this makes searching, so often we have those file names that have extended information, but I'm just looking for the project number, which is the third thing in, or whatever it is. And when I type this, I can go find this information just based off of that I'm typing in. I don't have to put in wildcards. I still can, But because these files are broken up into those tokens in that way, it's really easy for me to go find that information looking at it the way that I did. PWR was one I saw just a minute ago, right? So here's PWR, which is broken out by a separate token. It just goes finds that information. Never mind that it's CF101, never mind all of this. It's a separate piece that it's looking for within there. So that's really my first big tip, is to use those tokens to search for things. Because it's essentially exactly the same as if I had said CF101-DCDC-PWR-HRNS. I'm going to find the same thing just by that search. Now, I'm probably going to pick up more because there's more things in my case that related to that token. But I see this really commonly where people will start typing out this, long, complicated file name, but the only part they're interested in is this one piece. So, tip number 1, use tokens. It's such a great way to search within there, and it's a really, really powerful tool that allows us to leverage that database that's there. I think it's just a great way to quickly do that. And again, this is off Autodesk's website. If you just search by tokens on Autodesk, this list will come up. I don't think it's immediately obvious what it gets you when you read it. It wasn't to me anyway. When I first looked, I'm like, oh yeah, clearly I can use it, and it'll do this, this, and this. This is something that just through use has started to make more sense. This is a simple one, using shortcuts. But a lot of times when I'm doing new implementations for clients or we're talking through how they're going to do it, one of the big questions that comes up is, well, gosh, I get into Vault and I go to open a file from Vault, and I have to, I've got all of this different information I've got to navigate down to. I've got a lot of things to go look at, and there's just all this information. I'm looking at the entire Vault. What I used to be able to do with Inventor was I could have commonly used folders. And maybe I could say, yep, I always go to this folder to do something. So in my Inventor project, I had commonly used folders. Well, with a Vault project, those go away. We don't have commonly used folders. So what I would recommend, and a tip I throw out to a lot of people, is just to use the shortcuts that we have available to us within Vault. They really speed up navigation. It does a great job of replacing that idea of commonly used folders that we used to see within Inventor. We can create them, delete them, rename them at any time. They are just a pointer. If I delete a shortcut, it does not delete a file. If I if I go in and say, oh, well, let's delete this one, I can recreate it 5 minutes later, rename it, whatever. They are shared between Vault and Inventor, and I'll point that out in a minute. So if I have a shortcut that I put into Inventor, it shows up in Vault. If I put it in Vault, it shows up in Inventor. But they are specific to the machine they're created on. So while they're shared between the two products, it's not something where if I create a shortcut, Cassie can see it the next time she logs into Vault, right? It's going to be specific to my instance and my information that I'm putting together. So again, I'm going to go share my screen. And you see I've got a series of shortcuts over here that I've already created within Vault. And to create a shortcut, it's one of the simplest things that we can do. I don't think I've got one for this yet. No. I'll just right-click on this and say Create Shortcut. It's truly about that easy. I now have a shortcut to that. And the way that those work is if I want to activate one, all I have to do is click on it. And it takes me right to that folder that I'm looking for, which I've apparently spelled wrong. So it takes me to my Life Cycles folder, and I can go look for that. Or my 430 switch folder. It takes me and I can go look right at that. You'll notice that a few of these have the folder icon, but a couple of them, this one has a drawing icon. And that's because I took a particular file that I'm working on, and I said Create Shortcut. I'm just checking. I don't think I have that one. So here it just jumps me right to the clutch assembly, right? So now, anytime I open Vault and I want to go look at that, I can click on it. Takes me right to it. You can even go so far as to creating groups within here. And again, we can rename these groups, and I'll call this project 123. because these are some files that I just keep working on associated to that, and I'll just group these together. So now, if I want to go to Project 123, here's some files related to that. And again, it's just a quick way to navigate around Vault and go look at the information that's there. The great thing is, if they exist here in Vault, so I've created these in Vault, I've done the right click, I've created shortcuts, I've gone through and set them up into these groups. If I take a look here in Inventor, and I go to Open from Vault, so this is key. I won't see this if I just use my regular Open, right? So if I just say, yeah, let's open up a file, I'm not going to see all those shortcuts. I'm not going to see my commonly used folders, like I would before. But under Vault, if I say Open, I'm going to see that list of shortcuts, even the group that I have here, and all of that information becomes part of it. So now I can just navigate between any one of those by clicking on that. Same thing as I mentioned before. I'll go up here to this folder. If I take it here, I don't want to. I can say create a shortcut, and it creates my another shortcut. So I'm doing it here on the Inventor side. Now that'll show up on the Vault side as well. So it'll work from either direction. I can create it in Vault and go across. I can create it in Inventor, and it will go back. So I'll jump back over here to Vault, and I have a new shortcut created down here at the bottom. So I can reorder these. Maybe I just want all my parts in one spot and my folders in another, and I'll rename it, current project. This does not rename the file. This does not rename the assembly. It doesn't rename a folder. It just renames that shortcut that I have over there. So tip number 2, use shortcuts. These are really, really powerful tools that allow me to move between these. I can, like I said, I'm like, well, I don't need this one anymore. We're all done with that. We'll just go ahead and delete it. No problem. Yep, delete the shortcut, gone. Again, didn't affect any files, didn't affect any folders, but it just removed that shortcut from my list. Because over time, you will build up a series of those, and you've been using them for a while, and now we've got some shortcuts, and we just want to get rid of them. But it's creating the shortcuts, creating the groups. It's really, really a great way to move between all of that and to leverage what you have available. All right, so I'm going to move on. And I do see some questions coming in. We'll address those toward the end here. Once we get through this, we can kind of take a look at the questions that come in and talk through those. There's always a lot of, like I said, there's usually a lot of those within here. All right, so number 3, automatic folder cleanup. So, by the way, the token searching, if you have Vault Basic, it's totally available. You can try it as soon as the webinar is over. Shortcuts, Vault Basic again. Vault Basic, Vault Workgroup, Vault Pro all use that same basic functionality. This is the one that steps outside of that. So Workspace Sync is not available within Vault Basic. So I'll just point that out right there. But Workspace Sync in Vault Workgroup and Vault Pro, this is a way you can clean up your working folders. So when you're working, when you check a file out of Vault, and this is just basic Vault functionality, when I check a file out of Vault, it copies the file from Vault to a local working folder, typically on your C drive or your D drive, just depending how you have it configured. But you could, over time, end up with a whole bunch of files on your C drive. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, right? It's possible that you're taking up space and you don't need these files and so on and so forth. So you could then go in and start deleting files off of your, out of your working folder. Again, this works. That's absolutely fine. You can do that with Vault Basic. You can manually go into your working folder and delete the files out. What Workspace Sync allows us to do is it allows us to do this automatically. And not just automatically, but it does it in some pretty intelligent ways. Workspace Sync can update files that we have checked out. So if I currently have files checked out and there's new versions of that, it can get me some new information. If there are files I'm not using anymore, it can remove that. And it can skip designated files and folders, right? So it can go along and say, I could say, never delete anything from this particular folder. Do not touch it. So I'm going to walk through Workspace Sync. Again, if you've got Vault Workgroup, if you've got Vault Professional, this tool is there, has been all along. It's just one that gets overlooked a lot of times. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right. And Workspace Sync is right here. And there's also one called Quick Sync. I'll mention that in a minute. I'll go to Workspace Sync. And it's going to go through and look at the files that I have and some of this information. So it mentions that it is going to remove expired managed files, and it gives me a listing of the expired managed files it's going to move. It's going to remove some expired unmanaged files, and it doesn't look like we're updating anything right now, so it's not going to update anything. So at this point, this is showing me what it's going to remove from my hard drive. It's files that I had checked out a while ago and haven't touched. And then there's this idea of expired unmanaged. Expired managed were files that I had checked out of Vault. Expired unmanaged are files that I had worked on but have never been in Vault. So this might be something I created completely, I just did as a test and forgot about, whatever it is. But how does it know that it's expired? What's the criteria for knowing that it's expired? And I complained a minute ago about my icons being the same color. This is one I wish was much bigger. It looks like a copy to clipboard or something down here in the corner, but this settings, this is key. I'm going to go to my settings, and now I can tell this what I'm really looking for. So this is saying that a managed file, a file that I checked out of Vault and got copied to my drive, it's going to managed files expire after 3 days. So if I checked a file out, checked it in, if I run this 3 days later, it would consider that an expired managed file. Unmanaged files are files that I've never put in Vault, that I've got in my working folder structure, and I've got a longer lead time for them. Those expire after 3 weeks. I could tell it, don't even look at them. I only want to work with managed files. Unmanaged files, maybe I'm working with something on. I'm dealing with something specific. I can set this to days or weeks, and I think the top end is 15. I can also say, always delete log files, always delete AutoCAD backup files, just whatever other extensions I want in there. Doesn't matter whether it's expired or not, just get rid of it. I can also say, never, this switch folder, never delete something from the switch folder, because I might be, that's something I just like to keep there. I've been working on it. So I could add particular files. I could add a particular folder that I do not want removed from here. So I could say, I want to go in and this library, I never want it to be expired from there. I don't want to concern I don't want to deal with that one. And I can remove empty folders, which is something you might run into, because if you check a file out and then check it back in, sometimes you'll end up with an empty folder that's just sitting there. In this case, it'll go through and remove that. So this is where the settings come in. This is why it knows what's expired. This is, how it knows what's expired. This is how it knows what criteria I'm looking for with this. You really only have to set this once. I like to point out that it's here, but you really only have to do this the one time. This isn't something you have to go change every time. It is saved, and I can export those settings and then have someone else import them. So as an administrator, if you say, what, guys, across the board, I want you to run this once a week, and it'll clean up your thing. Here's some settings. No one else even has to worry about that. I'm actually going to cancel out of this, and the reason I am is I'm going to use Quick Sync. What Quick Sync does is it runs my existing settings without going through and pulling up that dialog box. If Workspace Sync goes through, retrieves the information, shows me what's here, I could uncheck certain ones, I could work with that. Quick Sync just basically does it, right? I don't see the dialog box. I don't see an options for additional settings. It just runs it in the background. It's exactly the same thing, but now those folders are cleaned up. So it's just a great way of keeping your working folders cleaned up using that tool to bring those down. If a file is checked out to you, it is automatically ignored. If you've got something currently checked out, it doesn't show up in here. You could have had it checked out for 2 months, and it does not care. All it's concerned with is a file that is sitting there that you haven't touched for a couple of weeks or days or whatever your settings are with that. So it's a great way to keep that cleaned up. Again, I think it's something that, when people first click on it, they're like, well, what is this thing? What is it doing? What's an expired file? Great tool. Highly suggest it. It's just a great way to leverage some things we have already within there. Okay. So, tip number 3, automatic working folder cleanup. Again, you don't have to. You could have your working folder be a complete mirror of your Vault. That's not going to break anything, but you definitely can set that up. I tend to want to keep it cleaned up. Generally speaking, I want that cleaned up. It's just part of how I tend to work with it. I like to have that be a tidy area. I did have one client, and they had some tremendous problems with their Vault, where a server went down and they thought they had lost so many things. It was actually a ransomware attack, and someone had checked out so many things over time they could almost repopulate their Vault with what they had checked out. So every once in a while it comes in useful, but that was a rare one. Typically, I want to keep that cleaned up. All right. This one is super interesting, labeling files. This goes back a ways. And when I was looking at some of these tips, I'm like, man, I almost didn't include this one. I don't think this applies to everyone all the time. It's definitely an occasional use tool, and it's a little bit older of a tool. I think this came out in 2014. So this is something that's been around for a while. But we can use labels to mark files in a folder. Oh, and I don't have my Vault Basic tag there, but this works with Vault Basic. I can label files in a folder and basically take a snapshot of them. So I can say, whatever the currently checked in tip version of this is, let's take a snapshot of this. And then I can go back and use that snapshot to restore files. I can pack and go files using that. Labels are a little different than some other things that we see. They don't really show up anywhere else. They don't really show up with, you won't see these in a property. They're not a property of Vault. They are not they don't get tagged to the file. I can't look at a file and see what label it has, but I can use it to snapshot a folder. So again, I'm going to share my screen. Here's my Vault. And I'll take, we'll go with this. I think I already did switch, but I'll do another one here. It's no problem. I can access this 2 ways, and it's interesting to me that this isn't talked about more because it's on the right-click menu. I mean, it's something we walk past all the time if we're going to a working folder, if we're using rename. Here's new label. And I'll choose new label, and it's going to say, okay, I'm going to create a label, and it's associated with the latest checked-in versions of all files within there. What do you want the label to be called? Doesn't matter. It could be red beans and rice. The name doesn't matter, but I'm going to call it switch, and I'll say 4/30/2020. One thing I would recommend is heavily commenting this, because I'm not going to see this much of anywhere else. I can't look at this file and see what labels are applied against it. So it's kind of like writing some code. It makes sense at the time, But if you don't comment it, later you'll have no clue what was going on. So the name can't have any special characters, some standard things we would think of with names. Comments, you can have whatever. Okay, so it looks like nothing happened. I put a label on it, done. And part of the reason that is because over here under Tools, I'm going to go to Labels. And again, this has been here for a long time, but I'm just going to go to Tools and Labels. And you can see I've got labels that are created here. I can see when the label was created, who created it, how many files are affected by that label. So in this case, I've got 27 files. And notice I got my comments. Here's the one I just created with 36 files. And the information's there. So, okay, what do we do with it? Well, one thing I can do is I could snapshot that folder and then later come back and I can restore that. It'll create a new file version. It will take whatever that version was at the time and basically make it the new version. So I could snapshot something, send it off to a client. They could look at it, and I could keep that snapshot there so I could restore to it at any time. I'm just going to go ahead and say yes. I don't think it's going to make too many changes, but it's going to take a look at the files. Oh, I've got one I didn't have permissions to. So this, because it's in Vault Basic, this works best if you do not have them in a released state. This does not replace released state, but it's a way of taking a snapshot of files at a certain point in time. If they were all work in progress, I could have updated them as well. But I can update them, so I can restore to a certain point in time. Let's see if these are, I think these will all work just fine. So I'll restore that to what it looks like at 4:30 at 10:24:07 a.m. Or I could pack and go that set of files with that label. So it's just going to grab anything with that label and deliver it to a pack and go for me. So again, this has been around for a while, and it's a way of thinking in projects. It's a way of marking those files. I don't think it's a daily use tool. I don't think it's a tool that is for everyone, but I definitely have seen instances where like, oh, what if we created a label? And then we start to talk about that. You can delete labels. You can rename labels. And all of these different tools that are part of that. So we can delete them, rename them, use them. Really interesting tool set that's available when we're working with labels. So again, not an everyday use. I feel like the searching with tokens is everyday use. Shortcuts is everyday use. You start looking at those, cleaning up your folder. Now these are interesting. Maybe I should have just called these tricks instead of tips, because these are ones that are out there a little bit. And this is my last one, and then we'll take a look at some questions. But man, is it something else. I think this is one of, again, it's not an everyday use tool, but wow, is it powerful. And it gets missed, and I'll point out why I think it gets missed. But we can replace a file in every assembly it is linked to, across the entire vault. So I can grab a particular file and say, I want to replace this one. And it'll go across the entire vault and work with that. So you can imagine with data loading, this is particularly useful. I've seen this a lot where people will have files, they get them loaded into Vault, and they get them set up and they get them put in there, and they've got a bracket that is, really, they created 4 versions of the same bracket. And these 20 assemblies are using this bracket, and those other 10 assemblies are using this one. Really, we want to consolidate that, and all of them use the same bracket. This is the tool that would do that. We can replace this in all locations. So once we've done a data load and we put that in, we could come back and use this replace tool to clean that up. It's a pretty familiar interface. It looks a lot like rename. And the rename tool obviously has been around for quite some time. This is going to be really similar to that as we go through. It's, again, just a great tool, to amazingly powerful, totally overlooked. And this is why. And I bring up rename. I think part of the reason this gets overlooked is because if I right-click, copy design is here, delete is here, purge is here, rename is here. These are all things you assume you're using. But oddly enough, I don't have, let me select the file first, there we go. I don't have replace. It only shows up here under my edit dropdown. That's it. I just find that strange that when I'm working with this, such a powerful tool doesn't show up. Purge does. Purge, delete, rename. I don't know why this one got left off. I would probably replace more often than I would purge, just as a guess. Maybe once we get it all replaced and everything's worked perfectly and your data is pristine and there are never any more errors, once you reach that point, maybe you never use this again. Maybe then you use purge more. But generally speaking, this is one that comes up a fair amount. So I've got this part, and this is, again, kind of a bracket. It's a holder that I've got within here. And here is the initial, here we've got similar versions, but I want to replace this one. And again, I don't have anything coming off that right click for this. I have to go over here. I have to go in and say replace. So I've selected the file that I want to replace first. I guess that's really the first key with this. Then I can say I want to replace that file. Now, I could add additional files here. I rarely do. Usually I think of this in terms of one, I want to replace this file. But I could have multiple files I'm working with. It went and found the assemblies that is in. It says that component is in this assembly. It's also in this assembly. And this could be 50, 100 assemblies. In this case, I've just set up a quick kind of test environment here where I was walking through this, so I've only got the 2. But realistically, this could be hundreds of assemblies that I want to replace this with. So those are the parents. Notice I do have the option to say, nah, I don't want to do that. But I can say, yep, those are the ones. That's what I want to do. And I love this. The following parent files will be repaired. So it's going to work with that. You do have to have permission to check out the files before you can work with this. So this is something it would have to be in a quick change or a work in progress state, some open state that I can get to. But I'll take that. I'm going to say, yep, that's what I want to do. And now it says, what do you want to replace it with? So I picked the file. I said, I'm replacing this file. I'm doing it in these assemblies. And to make my life easier, I just called it replacement. I said, yep, let's go replace it with replacement. And now it'll go through. I do get a warning that says, hey, if I went wildly different, if I went from a square to a round, just warning me, there might be some changes there. But now I can retrieve the files, pull them in, replace the ones that we have so that we can take the files, switch them out, replace them. And now I should be able to look at this. And I think it's this master one here. There we go. And say, what does it use? And it uses replacement. It swapped one out with the other and now uses that one. So if you're familiar with the replace command in Inventor, I can open an assembly and swap one part out for the other. I'm effectively doing that. It's the same thing. I'm just doing it in my Vault across the board. And again, I see this so much with data loading. You put a bunch of data into Vault, initial data that we're putting in, and what you'll run into is you now have maybe content center files that were created 3 or 4 different times, or 8 different engineers created the same bolt. We want to consolidate that. What a tremendous tool to do it. And again, I look at this as a tip because it's there. It's been there a long time. It's there across all versions of Vault, and it gets missed. I can tell you, to my embarrassment, that not so long ago, a couple years ago, I was talking with a client, and they said, hey, can I replace all this stuff across everything? I said, no, you can't. And one of the, Dominic Sheff, who has forgotten more about Vault than I will ever know, was there with me. He's another one of our project managers and just an outstanding data management resource. He was like, yeah, you can. And I was so embarrassed because I consider myself, yeah, I know all about Vault and manufacturing, and I totally, if I had learned about it, I'd forgotten it. So I want to pass it on to you so you don't make the same mistake. Can we replace all of this across Vault? Absolutely. And here's how we do it. So We talked about the idea of searching with tokens. We talked about the idea of shortcuts, cleaning up our information, the idea of labeling it, and then finally replacing files.